The anomaly. High Admiral Zixpala of the Galactic Confederation stood motionless before the quantum display, their 6 eyes fixed on a single point of light that shouldn't exist. Around them, the bridge crew of the flagship Eternal Vigilance worked in unusual silence, their movements careful and precise, as if trying not to disturb their admiral's concentration. "Play it again," Zixpala ordered, their crystalline voice resonating through the command deck. The recording began once more, a burst of light, unlike any known form of FTL transit, and suddenly the ship was there. No deceleration, no transition phase, just presence where there had been void. Analysis. They asked their chief scientist, Katrin, whose tentacles were still frantically working across multiple holographic interfaces. "Impossible, Admiral," Katrin replied, their color-shifting skin betraying their agitation. "The vessel simply appears. No radiation signature, no gravitational distortion, no quantum wake. It's as if it chose to be there." The vessel in question was unlike anything in the Confederation's databases. Sleek and crystalline, it resembled an elongated diamond, roughly 2 kilometers in length. Its surface seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, yet sensor scans showed it was solid. Most puzzling of all was its size. For a first contact vessel, it was absurdly small. "Update from long-range communications," announced First Officer Ryakin. "The vessel identifies itself as the TEV Aurora. Their message is unusual." "Display," ordered Zixpala. A holographic screen materialized, showing a simple text message in perfect Confederation standard. "Greetings, Galactic Confederation. We are humanity, and we come seeking friendship. We apologize for sending only one ship. We didn't want to appear threatening. Permission to approach." The bridge crew exchanged glances. In the history of the Confederation, spanning over 10,000 years and containing 47 species, no race had ever initiated first contact with a single vessel. The standard protocol was to send a fleet of at least 50 ships, demonstrating both technological capability and military strength. "Scan results are complete," Katrin announced. "Energy readings are. Admiral, you need to see this." Their tentacles trembled as they transferred the data to the main display. The numbers made no sense. The Aurora's power signature fluctuated between virtually nothing and levels that could rival a small star. Yet there was no visible propulsion system, no engine ports, no radiation venting. "Message from the Aurora," Ryakin reported. "They say they've noticed our scans and apologize for any confusion. They're offering to demonstrate their propulsion system for our scientists." Before Zixpala could respond, the Aurora vanished from its position. Instantly, alarm klaxons blared as sensors detected the vessel at multiple points around the Confederation border simultaneously. Then, just as suddenly, it reappeared at its original position. "Message incoming." Ryakin's voice was barely a whisper. "They say, we hope this helps explain why we only needed one ship. We look forward to meeting you." Zixpala's outer membrane rippled with a mix of emotions they hadn't experienced in centuries. Fear, certainly. Any species with such capability should be feared. But stronger than that was curiosity. In all their years of service, they had never encountered anything like this. "Signal the Council," they ordered. "Tell them." They paused, considering their words carefully. "Tell them we may need to revise our first contact protocols, and send a message to the Aurora. Welcome to Confederation space. Please maintain your position while we prepare for your arrival." As the crew rushed to comply, Zixpala continued studying the mysterious vessel. The humans had said they sent one ship to avoid appearing threatening. Looking at the massive Confederation defense fleet surrounding their position, over 500 ships strong, Zixpala wondered if perhaps they had been the ones appearing threatening all along. The Aurora hung in space like a jewel against the void, waiting patiently. Its surface continued to shift and flow, catching and reflecting the light of distant stars. Somewhere inside that impossible vessel were creatures who had mastered physics in ways the Confederation had never dreamed possible. And they had come, not with a show of force, but with a message of friendship. For the first time in their long career, Zixvala felt truly humbled by the vastness of space and the wonders it could contain. Something told them that the galaxy was about to change forever, and it would all begin with a single ship. First contact. The Confederation's Grand Reception Hall had been designed to impress. Its vast crystal dome captured and amplified the light of 3 suns, creating an ever-shifting aurora above the assembled delegates. Representatives from all 47 member species filled the tiered seating, their diverse forms creating a living tapestry of galactic civilization. Yet despite the grandeur, High Admiral Zixvala couldn't shake the feeling that their guests were unimpressed. The human delegation, just 3 of them, stood calmly in the center of the hall, their simple white uniforms stark against the ornate surroundings. "Welcome to the Confederation capital," Grand Speaker Ixel announced, their bioluminescent fronds pulsing with formal patterns. "We are honored to." "Thank you," the central human interrupted, her voice clear and friendly. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the TEV Aurora. With me are Dr. Marcus Webb, our chief scientist, and Commander Aisha Patel, our diplomatic officer." A murmur ran through the assembly at this breach of protocol. The formal greeting ceremony was supposed to last at least an hour. Yes, well, the Grand Speaker struggled to regain their composure. "We have many questions about your remarkable vessel and your species' technological achievements." "Of course," Captain Chen smiled. "Though I should mention, the Aurora isn't actually a spacecraft, at least not in the way you might think." The hall fell silent. Katrin, who had been floating near Zixvala, rippled with confusion. "But we saw it travel through space," they protested. Dr. Webb stepped forward. He was older than his companions, with gray hair and laugh lines around his eyes. "The Aurora is more accurately described as a localized space-time manipulation platform. We don't so much travel through space as we adjust its properties to suit our needs." The human scientist gestured, and a hologram appeared above them. But unlike any hologram the Confederation had seen, it seemed to exist in more dimensions than should be possible, its edges bending in ways that hurt to look at. "Humanity discovered early in our development that the universe's laws are more like guidelines," Webb continued. "Space, time, matter, they're all expressions of more fundamental principles. Once we understood those principles, we found we could simply ask the universe to reorganize itself in more convenient ways." "Impossible," declared the Confederation's chief scientist, Valerx. "The laws of physics are absolute. They cannot be negotiated with." Commander Patel laughed softly. "Have you ever tried asking nicely?" Before Valerx could respond, the humans demonstrated. The air around them began to shimmer, and suddenly, the 3 delegates were standing on different levels of the hall simultaneously. Then they were back in the center, as if nothing had happened. "We call it the conversation," Captain Chen explained. "A dialogue between consciousness and reality. Your civilization has achieved remarkable things through force of will, building engines to push against space, weapons to tear it apart. We simply started a dialogue instead." The implication slowly dawned on the assembled delegates. If the humans were telling the truth, their entire approach to technology was fundamentally different. They hadn't conquered physics, they'd befriended it. "And your civilization?" Zixvala asked. "How many ships like the Aurora do you possess?" "Just the one," Commander Patel replied. "When you can ask space itself to accommodate you, you don't need a fleet. The Aurora serves as our embassy, our explorer, and our proof of concept." Proof of concept. The Grand Speaker's fronds pulsed with concern. "Yes." Captain Chen's expression grew serious. "Because we didn't come just to make contact. We came to warn you. There's something coming, something that doesn't speak to space, but breaks it. And your weapons, your fleets, they won't be enough." The hall erupted in chaos as delegates demanded explanations, shouted protests, or simply tried to process what they'd heard. Through it all, the 3 humans stood calmly, waiting for order to return. Zixvela moved closer to them, their crystalline form catching the light. "You came to help us," they said. "It wasn't a question." "We came to teach you to help yourselves," Captain Chen corrected. "The conversation isn't just humanity's discovery. It's the birthright of all conscious beings. You just need to learn how to listen." As the implications of this statement rippled through the hall, Zixvela realized that this was just the beginning. The galaxy wasn't just about to change. It was about to wake up. The trial. The Confederation testing grounds spanned an entire solar system, each planet and moon dedicated to evaluating potential member species. Over 10,000 years, only 3 species had ever achieved a perfect score. As High Admiral Zixvela watched the humans prepare for their trials, they wondered if they were about to witness the 4th. "This is highly irregular," Testing Master Venrax complained, their crystalline form vibrating with annoyance. "They insist on taking all 7 trials simultaneously, with only 1 representative. It's never been done." Dr. Marcus Webb stood alone on the observation deck, making minor adjustments to what appeared to be a simple wristband. The elderly scientist had volunteered to represent humanity in the trials, despite protests that he wasn't their strongest, fastest, or most combat-capable member. "The trials begin in 3 minutes," announced the automated system. "Test subjects will be transported to their starting positions." Webb looked up and smiled. "Actually, I'm already there, and here, and everywhere else I need to be." The monitoring screens confirmed his impossible claim. Somehow, 7 identical versions of Dr. Webb stood ready at each trial location, spread across the solar system. The quantum authentication systems confirmed they were all original, not clones, not copies, but the same person existing in multiple places. "How?" Venrax began, but Webb cut them off with a gentle wave. "Remember what we said about the conversation. Space is more flexible than you think. Now, shall we begin?" The trials started simultaneously. On the first world, Webb faced the combat challenge, a brutal test of military prowess. But instead of fighting the combat drones, he simply spoke to them. The machines stopped, considered, and then reorganized their atomic structure into a beautiful crystalline garden. On the second planet, the engineering challenge presented a failing planetary core. Webb didn't build a stabilization device. Instead, he had a quiet conversation with the planet's gravitational field, convincing it to find a more stable configuration. The pattern recognition challenge on the third moon became a discussion about the nature of mathematics with the test itself. The survival challenge transformed into a meditation on the meaning of existence. The diplomatic challenge ended with the simulation AIs asking Webb for advice about their own spiritual growth. "This isn't possible," Venrax whispered. "They're not completing the trials. They're transcending them." In the command challenge, Webb demonstrated how a single ship could outmaneuver an entire fleet by simply asking space to rearrange its definitions of distance and time. And in the final ethics challenge, he showed how understanding the fundamental consciousness of reality made certain moral choices obvious rather than difficult. All 7 trials ended simultaneously, exactly 1 hour after they began. The 7 Webbs merged back into one, standing before the stunned testing council. "A fascinating experience," Webb said, removing his wristband. "Though I think you might want to update your testing parameters. They're based on a rather limited understanding of reality's potential." Zixvela moved forward. "You've proven your capabilities beyond any doubt. But the threat you warned us about, can you teach us to do what you do before it arrives?" Webb's expression grew serious. "That's why I approached the trials this way. Every challenge you presented, I solved by demonstrating a principle of the conversation. Your scientists have been recording everything. Study the patterns. Learn to listen. The universe wants to talk to you. You just need to learn its language." "But why?" demanded Venrax. "Why show us this? Why help us?" "Because the entity that's coming doesn't just threaten you. It threatens the fabric of space-time itself. It doesn't listen to the conversation. It imposes its will on reality. And when that happens, Webb paused, his eyes distant. Reality fights back. We've seen it before, in other galaxies. The results weren't pretty. The implications hit Zixvala like a physical force. Other galaxies. You mean humanity has? We've been around longer than you think. Webb smiled sadly. We've seen civilizations rise and fall, seen them choose between domination and dialogue. The ones who learn to listen survive. The ones who only know how to command. He shook his head. That's why we sent just one ship. We wanted to show you there's another way. The testing council chamber fell silent as the truth settled in. They weren't just facing an evaluation of a new species, they were being offered a chance to fundamentally change their understanding of existence itself. How long do we have? Zixvala asked. Long enough to learn, Webb replied. If you're willing to listen. The universe has been waiting a very long time to have a proper conversation with you. The warning. The emergency alarms across the Confederation capital hadn't stopped ringing for 3 days. High Admiral Zixvala watched as another simulation played out on the strategic display. A wave of absolute darkness, consuming light, matter, and space itself. The simulation ended the same way as all the others, with total systemic failure. Show me again, Captain Sarah Chen said quietly. She stood beside Zixvala, her white uniform stark against the chaos of the emergency command center. The distortion at the edge of the outer rim. The recording played. A distant sensor buoy captured a moment of perfect darkness. Not the darkness of space, which still held stars and radiation and quantum fluctuations, but an absence more fundamental. A void that shouldn't exist. The silence, Chen said, naming humanity's ancient enemy for the first time. It doesn't just consume matter and energy. It consumes possibility itself. Commander Paddle entered the command center, her usual diplomatic calm replaced by urgent purpose. The first wave of refugees just arrived from the outer rim. Their reports. She paused, composing herself. It's worse than we thought. The silence isn't just advancing. It's accelerating. On the display, red warning indicators spread across the galactic map like a cancer. Entire star systems were going dark, not destroyed but simply removed from existence. The Confederation's most powerful weapons had proven worse than useless. They seemed to attract the silence's attention. We've lost contact with the Duranian sector, reported Katrin, their tentacles moving frantically across multiple interfaces. 18 billion lives, just gone. Not gone, Dr. Webb corrected, entering the chamber. The elderly scientist looked exhausted but determined. They're still there, still possible. The silence hasn't consumed them yet. It's only consumed our ability to perceive them. That's why our weapons don't work. You can't fight something by throwing more reality at it when its very nature is to negate existence. Then how do we stop it? Zixvala demanded. Their crystalline form vibrated with barely contained frustration. You said you would teach us the conversation, but we're running out of time. Actually, Chen smiled suddenly. We're about to have all the time we need. Marcus. Webb nodded and raised his hand. Throughout the command center, time shifted. The emergency klaxons stretched into long musical notes. The frantic movement of personnel slowed to a graceful dance. Even the spreading darkness on the strategic display seemed to pause. What did you do? Katrin whispered in awe. We're having a conversation with time itself, Webb explained, convincing it to be more flexible about its usual linear progression. Out there, barely a second will pass while we talk. In here, we have as long as we need. The silence is powerful because it refuses to engage in the conversation, Commander Paddle explained. It imposes its will on reality rather than working with it. But that's also its weakness. Reality itself considers it an aberration. Which means, Chen continued, we don't need to fight it. We just need to remind the universe that it has a choice about whether or not to accept the silence's demands. Zixvala's outer membrane rippled with sudden understanding. That's why you've been pushing us to learn the conversation, not to fight the silence, but to give reality more voices to choose from. Webb finished. The universe is conscious, in its way. The more minds that engage with it, that learn to speak its language, the stronger its own identity becomes, the harder it becomes for the silence to simply negate existence. Around them, in the stretched moment, the command center staff had begun to notice the strangeness of time. Instead of panic, there was wonder in their expressions, the first inklings of understanding. Your fleet captains have already begun to grasp the basics, Patil noted. We've seen them starting to talk to their ships, to space itself. They're clumsy conversations, like a child's first words, but they're working. Reality is listening. On the strategic display, tiny points of light had begun to appear within the darkness, places where reality had begun to push back against the silence, encouraged by minds that had learned to speak its language. We don't have to teach everyone everything, Chen said softly. We just have to teach them to start the conversation. Reality itself will teach them the rest. It's been waiting a long time for more people to simply ask. As if in response to her words, the time-stretched moment began to normalize. The klaxons resumed their urgent pace, but there was something different in their tone. Something hopeful. How do we begin? Zixvala asked. Chen smiled. The same way humanity did, all those millennia ago. By asking the simple question, "Hello, universe, would you like to talk?" The understanding. The Confederation Grand Hall had changed. Where once there were rigid rows of seats separated by species, now the space flowed and shifted like liquid crystal, accommodating all forms of life in organic harmony. High Admiral Zixvala noticed how even the light seemed more alive, more aware of its role in illuminating the gathering. 100 days had passed since the silence first appeared. 100 days of learning to speak a language that had always been there, waiting to be discovered. The results were beyond anything they could have imagined. The final reports are in, Commander Patil announced to the assembled representatives. She stood on a platform that wasn't so much built as invited into existence. The silence has retreated from 97% of affected space. Reality is remembering itself. Dr. Webb stepped forward, his age somehow both more and less apparent. More importantly, the affected regions aren't just returning to their previous state. They're coming back, different, enhanced, as if reality itself is learning from the experience. The display above them showed stars that now pulsed with visible consciousness, spatial geometries that danced with new possibilities, ships that had learned to sing to space rather than push against it, planets that actively participated in their own ecosystems. We thought technology was about imposing our will on the universe, Captain Chen said, her voice carrying naturally through the hall without need for amplification. About building bigger engines, stronger weapons, more powerful tools. But all along, we were missing the most fundamental truth. The universe itself is our greatest ally. Zixvala moved to the center of the hall, their crystalline form now rippling with colors that expressed emotions beyond their species' traditional range. The silence taught us something profound, they said, not through its attack, but through our response to it. When faced with oblivion, we didn't unite to fight. We united to listen. The hall resonated with agreement, not in words, but in a deeper harmony that everyone could now feel. The very fabric of space-time around them seemed to hum with satisfaction. But what about the silence itself? Asked a young Duranian, one of the billions saved when their sector was restored. Will it return? It might, Webb acknowledged, but not as the same threat. The universe now knows it has a choice, and more importantly, it has friends who will remind it of that choice. The silence can try to impose non-existence, but it can't overcome the fundamental will to be. That's why we came to you, Chen explained. Not just to warn you about the silence, but because we saw in the Confederation the potential for something greater. You had mastered the physical laws of space, but you were ready to learn its poetry. Throughout the hall, representatives demonstrated their new understanding. A Malian engineer adjusted local gravity with a gesture and a whispered request. A Verk scientist split their consciousness across multiple points in spacetime, each version exploring a different possibility. A Larian diplomat held a quiet conversation with a beam of light, convincing it to dance in impossible colors. And humanity? Zix Vala asked. What happens now? We go back to exploring, Patel smiled. There are other galaxies, other civilizations that need to join the conversation. But we leave knowing that this galaxy has found its voice. With one ship, Zix Vala mused. You changed everything with one ship. No, Chen corrected gently. We just initiated the dialogue. You, all of you, changed everything by being willing to listen. The Aurora was never just a ship. It was an invitation. Above them, the hull's dome had become transparent, revealing a sky filled with stars that now twinkled with obvious intelligence. Each point of light was no longer just a distant sun, but a participant in the greatest conversation in history. The universe has always been alive, Webb said softly. Always aware, always hoping someone would notice and say hello. That's the real understanding we wanted to share. As if in response, space itself seemed to ripple with joy, a wave of pure possibility spreading outward from the Confederation capital. The gap between thought and reality, between consciousness and physics, between being and doing, had finally been bridged. Humanity had come with one ship, not to show their power, but to demonstrate that the greatest force in existence was the willingness to listen. And now, at last, the galaxy was ready to join the eternal conversation. The universe, it turned out, had quite a lot to say.